from the Makerspace to answer any questions today. Just going to adjust my camera angle a little bit. Hi, for those who are just joining, I'm Holly Arneson. I'm the Associate Manager of the Makerspace, and I'm really excited to answer questions that you might have about the Makerspace and our new expanded Makerspace at Milner. So I'm just waiting for some questions. While I'm waiting, I'm just going to slightly pan around a little bit just so that you can see that we have some studios. There's a new large studio. There's 3 studios in total for the Makerspace. I don't think this was quite finished if you just watched the preview video about the Makerspace. We've been adding a lot of finishing touches as we've been going. I'll just pan around a little bit further here. And you can see there's the other 2 studios. Pretty exciting. Really looking forward to having people able to come in and make some music. So I'm just waiting for some questions. Oh, a great question to start out with. What's my favorite part of the Makerspace right now? Definitely one of my most favorite things about the Makerspace right now, I'm actually just going to see if I can take you on the road here a little bit, because I did set it up this morning, is so we have some amazing new equipment in the Makerspace, and one of my absolute favorites is this new Korg mini synthesizer. And it just makes amazing sounds. It's so great for experimentation, and we can't wait to see like what people do with that as they're exploring and they're trying out different combinations and learning how to use the synthesizer. So that's one of my absolute favorite things. Oh, there's a lot. While I'm waiting for some other questions, I'll talk about one of my other favorite things in the Makerspace right now, which is we're introducing a laser cutter. And this was made by a staff member. This is an illustration made with Illustrator. And I think it just looks amazing. And I'm just really excited for us to produce more of those. I just received a question, what's one of the most interesting things that we've ever made with the 3D printer? And I have a couple of things that I really are memorable, but one of my absolute favorite things is one of our regulars who'd done quite a few book projects previously, one day brought in a CD-ROM, and on the CD-ROM were CT scan files, and he asked if we could print out his brain. And so we found really great documentation on the internet, and we were able to take those files and convert them into a 3D printable object. And of course, we took it to the next level by also printing that brain model in glow-in-the-dark filament. And you know, the result was just amazing. It's such a cool thing. Something that when I started out working in libraries for the very first time, I never thought that I could tell you that I worked at a library that actually did that. So that's one of my favorites. One of the things that we're really looking forward to with the new Makerspace is in terms of 3D printing. As you may have seen in the video, we're going to be offering a new model of access for it. So we're going to basically have a training program where people come in, they receive some training on how to use the 3D printer and how to do some basic design and troubleshooting for it as well. And then we'll provide bookable slots for people to access the 3D printer to come in, load up their job. Staff will be there supervising and helping, but I think it's so much fun. It can be totally mesmerizing. It's a great learning experience, and we're really looking forward to having access to that for the public. While I'm waiting for other questions, I'll just show you another favorite thing of mine that we've printed. This is people who know a little about 3D printing may recognize this. It's a very large boat, and it's called Benchy, and it's actually a really kind of infamous calibration model that people use to tell how well tuned their 3D printer is. So, for example, if you can really clearly read the bottom, and if things are really sharp, that's on the bridging, that's usually a sign of like a really well-tuned 3D printer. So this is one of my favorite things that we have hanging around the Makerspace as well. So I just received a question, can you create your own unique face masks in the Makerspace? And yes, you can make your own unique face masks in the Makerspace. That's actually something that Marty Chan did with us when he came to visit recently. I'm going to take you over really quickly to show you the sewing machines and some of the masks that have been made. So I'm just going to show you everybody here. I'm just going to angle it down a little bit. It might be a little bit hard to see. Let me just check my lighting here. But we're introducing some sewing machines, and you can see that staff have been doing a little bit of testing. They've actually been using the laser cutter together with the sewing machines to test out different mask types. So there are some pieces of different masks here, but this one, they were prototyping a windowed mask. We know that people who may have difficulty hearing, might have difficulty with masks. So we were thinking about that and really testing that out. As you can see, there's a full suite of tools here that people will be able to use to create masks, to do all kinds of kind of basic or, maybe even a little bit more intermediate sewing projects. So I'm just gonna wait. Oh, so someone has just asked, what kind of training will you need for the Fab Lab? That's a really good question. So the Fab Lab, as you may have seen in the video, it introduces a whole bunch of new tools, the laser cutter, the CNC mill. We're going to be introducing a scroll saw, a drill press, and some sanding equipment as well. So with the Fab Lab, having these access to these tools, there's a little bit more risk. There's more hazards that people need to be aware of. So what we'll be doing is we'll be offering an introductory training certification for the Fab Lab itself. The first time someone wants to use the Fab Lab, we'll basically take them through this process, and we expect it'll be probably 15 to 20 minutes, just kind of helping them understand what the basics about staying safe in the Fab Lab are. Then as people are kind of getting into particular projects, so let's say they're doing something with the laser cutter, there may be an additional training program that we do just around that tool itself. So probably an introductory course, probably a couple of hours or up to 3 hours, where we'd be taking the person through not only the safe operation of that tool, but also some of the other things around design, some of the things around like troubleshooting and settings, helping people work through basic projects. So there's going to be different layers of training. It should be really fun, should be an interesting way to be introduced, and we'll be helping people through that. I've received a question as well. We're going to be introducing a new bookmaking process in the Fab Lab, and I've received a question about how will that, or what will the price be for the new bookmaking process? We're actually still in the process of determining the details for that. One of the principles of the Makerspace is really around creating equitable access for as many of our community members in Edmonton as we can. And so we're often working from a cost recovery framework. We're not looking at billing people for machine time or for staffing. We're really looking at, the consumable costs of the paper, of the ink, or the toner that's used in the process. So we'll be releasing more details as we get a little bit closer. So I've received another question about sewing, and the question is, will someone be able to teach me how to sew in the Makerspace? So this is a really great question, and we definitely will be able to help people get started. I have some of our Makerspace assistants who are quite well versed in sewing and make their own projects and are really capable at helping people. And what we've been doing with them during the closure period is we were working on basically having them train and work with other staff so that everybody has sort of a base level of sewing knowledge. So everybody here should be able to help you get started. There might be some folks who are a little bit better if people have more complicated projects or something that's a little bit more intermediate. But this is also an area where, as we're able to expand what we're able to do in person, we'll be looking for community members to get involved in sewing as well. We know that there's so much knowledge, so much passion for sewing in the community, so really excited about that. So I've received a question about the recording studios, and the question is, how will they work during COVID? That's such a good question, and really, safety and COVID, the safety of our staff and our customers is just top of mind in terms of us reopening. And there are definitely some things that we had hoped to do that we're just going to have to be patient about. With the recording studios, and just kind of shifting back to look at a couple of them for a moment, the original intention was for them to have in the large studio like 5 to 7 people, in the medium studio 3 to 5 people, and then the smaller studio is more of a 2-person booth. In light of COVID, though, we have to be a lot more careful. We have some capacity guidelines that we need to attend to. There's going to be enhanced cleaning procedures. So we're going to have smaller groups, probably 2 people at most in the large studio, 1 person at most in the medium studio. So I've just received a new question, and that's about the importance of the Makerspace in Edmonton's community. And I love talking about that. I think one of the things that we've really learned since 2013, since we launched the initial Makerspace, is that there are very few places where people can come in and with relatively low barriers in terms of cost or in terms of a clear process and people to help them get started. There's not too many places like that in the city for these kinds of technologies. Certainly, there are some things that are available through post-secondary, but you have to be a student. And what if you've graduated, or what if you're coming back to a set of hobbies after things are later in life? So for us, the Makerspace, it's so important because people have been able to come at all walks of life, whether they are, someone who's thinking about starting a small business, someone who's just graduated and is looking to continue a project or a set of learning. It's families, it's, artists who maybe don't have access or can't practice at home. It's everybody coming in, and we learn so much when people come in, and we learn from them too. It's so much fun. So I've received a question about, will it be possible to print a sewing pattern? And yes, I think we will have access to printers here in the library. We're just working out how that's going to work in the Makerspace itself. But we do have printers here, and even the Cricut, I'll highlight, and the Roland vinyl cutter that we have, they're also able to cut out fabric as well. So if someone has a digital pattern that's been translated into the way that Cricut or Roland can understand, they'll be able to get their fabric cut out. We've also been, as I mentioned earlier, experimenting a lot with the laser cutter. So for some designs, it may make sense to take them over to the laser, as long as the material and the laser are going to play well together. So lots of exciting possibilities around cutting out patterns at the library. Not just paper, but we can do paper too. So I've received a question about, why have makerspaces been so popular in libraries? And this is such an interesting question, and I think it's really connected to the traditional role that the library has played in the community in terms of a place both for people to learn things, but also to find enjoyment, find relaxation, really let the imagination and the ideas like run wild. And often, traditionally, that's been, through the course of a good book, or through learning, taking home a hobby book and learning that. And what's been really popular about makerspaces is that we're taking that excitement, those ideas that are generated as knowledge is passed along, and we're actually giving people an opportunity to do those things hands-on with staff supporting them. So I think that's a big reason why they've been so popular. Also in the makerspace, as you probably saw if you've been following since the children's makerspace this morning, we have really cute robots, and that makes a lot of difference. So I've received a question about whether we've consulted with other libraries while making our new makerspace. And yes, we actually were very fortunate to have 2 interns last year, and then we have sort of a community of practice here locally with other institutions in the city. We've also been looking far afield, places in the US, places in central Canada. With our interns, we were able to survey both other libraries and nonprofit institutions as well, so nonprofit and community makerspaces. And we were kind of really able to understand from that process, what people were doing, what was working well, some of the new technologies that we've introduced, like how other libraries are structuring their services. So we really had a look at what libraries were doing. We also looked back at what we've been doing since 2013, things that we've learned in the process of operating Makerspace since that time. And we really kind of put that into, well, what's working well, what do we want to do better, bigger, and even bolder than before. So lots of research has gone into this project. So sorry, I will have to repeat the question so that everybody can hear it, but I've received a question about, will the robots remain dressed up? So I think this is a reference to the robots in the children's makerspace, and they're currently pre-COVID, just I think in January or February, the last thing that they did is that those robots were part of a program called Robots Drag Race, I believe at the Mill Woods branch location. And so it was basically an introductory robotics program. And there was a component where people designed costumes, they designed the look for the robot. And then there was also a component where they had to code the movements of the robot. And since we had that long period where our branches were closed, they remained in costume and in the look all the way along. So yeah, we may redress them or take their look in a different direction at some point, but we're expecting to do more introductory robotics programming that's high interest like that. And with a lot of these cool tools, like we can start to get pretty fancy with some of the costumes that we're able to make using tools like the vinyl cutter and a t-shirt press as well. And I'm just gonna check in here with Houston and have them repeat that last question because I kind of missed that one while I was getting really excited talking about robots. So I've had a question, did I have to learn to use all of the equipment in the makerspace? I think this is about me personally, and it's an interesting question. I have learned to use much of the equipment in the makerspace. I wouldn't say I've gotten to learn to use all of the equipment yet. So in terms of the pieces of the makerspace that I really love to use, and I've gone through a lot of learning about, is probably for me the 3D printers and our robots. Those are the ones where I've done a lot of learning. A little bit around some of our basic woodworking tools as well. So the scroll saw, I kind of know what I'm doing there. I still have to learn how to use I haven't really done anything with the CNC mill yet. I've been standing back to let the staff play with that one. So, oh wow! So I have almost a very meta question here from Bryce, who you may know from EPL's Overdue Fines podcast. It's an award-winning podcast and a really fun listen. And Bryce is asking, when will he be able to use the studios to broadcast Overdue Fines or record their next episode? And I'm really happy to let Bryce know that we're going to start to accept bookings for the studios as of September the 21st. So we'll have the medium and the large studio available at first. Unfortunately, though, Bryce, you may need to just take that time to learn some gear. We're probably going to have a few restrictions at first around vocal and wind instruments just from that safety and COVID perspective. But Bryce, just, be patient. We're going to get there. All right. I've received another question, which is, what am I, Holly, most excited to share with Edmontonians? And this is really tough for me because as I think the viewers have been able to tell, I'm really excited about the new Makerspace. It's big, it's beautiful, there's so much potential. And I think that is my answer. I know it's maybe not the most interesting answer, but it's really the whole Makerspace experience. Edmontonians were so lucky to have this resource. We've gone from sort of a 2,600 square foot space to 10,000 square feet of makerspace that we're offering. So we're so excited to just see what people will make. That's my favorite thing, is seeing what people will do when we have 3D printers, when we have sewing machines, when we have electronics workbench. You don't know what exciting things people are going to make. So I've received another question about any makerspace projects that I'm working on for myself. So that's a really great question. I do actually have a couple that I've been working on. So I have a kit at home. One of the things that we've done in the past here at the library is Raspberry Pi. A little bit of programming, we've loaned them out in the past, and we've also done some Arduino workshops. And I'd like to see us get a bit more into that. So one of the things that I'm building at home is a Raspberry Pi arcade. And there's probably going to be a few 3D printing modifications I'll have to make. So, all right. So I've received a good question about what kind of audio editing and what kind of video editing software is there available on the Makerspace computers. This is a great question. So in terms of our audio editing software, we have included basically from sort of an entry-level perspective all the way up to sort of a near performance or production grade audio software. So we have GarageBand and Audacity at sort of the more entry level beginner end. Then we have digital audio workstations Logic and FL Studio, and then we also have Ableton. That's one that we've put a lot of resources and learning into. I'm just trying to think if I've forgotten anything. On our creative computers, we also have Adobe Creative Cloud All Apps, and we have Adobe Audition as part of the audio editing suite as well. In terms of video editing, we have iMovie, Final Cut Pro, and we also have Adobe Premiere. So lots of opportunity for people who are doing audio editing. So I've received another question while I've been talking about what is I think it's the most amazing thing that I've ever seen 3D printed. That's such a tricky question. In terms of amazing things that I've seen 3D printed here, one thing that really sticks out to me is we had some researchers come over from the U of A one day, and I'm not sure, I think they may not have been able to get quick access to a 3D printer there. There's a lot of 3D printing now in a lot of different faculties at the U of A, but they knew that there was a 3D printer at the Makerspace, and they had a tracheotomy surgery trainer. And so we printed it out for them, and it was really cool for me to see that we printed something that was like researchers basically had published about in an academic peer-reviewed journal, and also something that this group of researchers was going to use and kind of test out. And I think that really shows the potential of the technology. So that's one of my favorites. I've also received a question about what is my favorite, what are my favorite new feature other than the Makerspace? Okay, folks, other than the Makerspace. I'd have to say it's a real tie between the wall and the gamer space. The gamer space, I think people are going to be blown away when they see how cool it is and like what a great community space it is to celebrate gaming. The wall, I just love those dinosaurs, and I love the coral reef too. Those are so much fun, and it's been so fun as we've been getting set up here to just kind of like hear dinosaur yells, happening in the library as they've been testing things. So those are some of my favorite things in the new Milner. It's hard to choose just one though. It's just a gorgeous building inside here. So I've been asked if I could play any video game on the wall, which one would it be? Whew. Well, I'd always jokingly tease the people who are the project team for the wall, and I tell them that I'd really like to play Microsoft Excel on the wall, which just causes so much eye-rolling, folks. They don't really like hearing that. It's a really big, beautiful, immersive experience. You don't need to be showing people spreadsheets. I guess the other thing that I would really love to see played is maybe the Horizon Zero Dawn game. That one's really gorgeous and might look great on the wall. So I've been asked about the acoustics of the studio spaces, and the question is, if I come in and I want to play violin, will the sound of the violin disturb others in the library? That's such a good question. So with these studios, there's actually been quite a bit of acoustical engineering that's gone into them. They have floating floors. They have thicker constructions on the drywall stud. They have also dropped ceilings with an acoustical plenum. So there's a lot that we've put into them. Nonetheless, though, some of these like really resonant instruments may be able to slightly escape all of the engineering that we've done. So we're going to gauge and see how that goes. We know in the past that bagpipes have been one where they've been quite, we have someone who comes in bagpipes and it's quite loud. I think that the new studios that we have will really make it much easier for other people to practice at the same time and to not disturb the rest of the library. I've received a question about if someone wanted to print off small pieces for a board game, how long would that take? And that's a really good question. So with our 3D printers, their speeds are often somewhere between like 45 meters per second on the movement of the 3D printer, and they're extruding, you know, probably like zero point 0.4 millimeters, you know, per step as they move around. So it's not a fast process with the regular 3D printers, the ones that use PLA filament. But probably a small piece like this, a small meeple, would probably be about an hour for something the size of a thumb. Could be faster or slower depending on how big it is and how complex it is. I've received another question about 3D printing, and the question was, what kind of 3D printers are in the Makerspace? So for those of you who are really into your 3D printing hardware, we have a number of Prusa MKS3 3D printers, and we have a number of Ultimaker 3 Pro 3D printers as well. There's 2 of those. We have more Prusas. Those are the single nozzle printers, and we think those will be great for learning and teaching and supporting the self-serve 3D printing process. The Ultimakers can print with dual nozzles, so we can do like wash away supports or 2 color prints with those. We also have an SLA resin printer for the first time called the Formlabs Form 3. So I've received a question about what kinds of classes are we the most excited about hosting in the Makerspace eventually. And I have a few thoughts on that. I think we're really excited to offer classes around the tools in the Fab Lab to get people up and running on the laser cutter, to kind of do really interesting, like, you know, laser cutting for sewing enthusiasts, or, you know, how to like build an enclosure for a smart plant care kit that you're making. So those kinds of things that put more than one piece of technology into conversation with one another. I think also with the studios, we're really excited to see, you know, can we have somebody from the community who wants to share their audio production knowledge with the public? We're really excited eventually to be able to do those kinds of programs again. We want to really get into Ableton and, you know, producing beats and playing with synthesizer and things like that. So I think we're really excited about almost all aspects of programming in the Makerspace and the classes and events that we can run. The 3D printing self-serve, I think, is one of the ones that we're excited about that we'll be able to do right away. So really looking forward to that. So I've received a question about how do I personally stay on top of all of the new technology? That's a really great question. And it's something that I know a lot of people think about, particularly if they're in fields where they might be using technology in their work, or they might be designing technology-based experiences for others. So honestly, social media, I know it can be sometimes a little bit tough with, you know, the volume and the kinds of things that people share about, but I find Twitter really useful for keeping up with new ways that people are using 3D printing. So I've watched a lot of interesting projects on Instagram and Twitter about, you know, printing with clay or different ways of using the technology. And I think also just kind of looking around and seeing what peer institutions are doing, what kinds of technologies are being used in film production even, lots of different ways. I just received a question about whether staff, are we done? Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I think this might be the last question. So I've received a question about whether the staff have received training on all the different technologies. And yes, we are working through all of the different technologies that are possible to train them on. Some of them have background skills already when they came to us, but we're working on making them a really well-trained group to support people. So thank you, everybody. I think we're a wrap for today, and we're really excited to have you in the Makerspace once you're able to visit, and enjoy the rest of the day today.